We saw some liquidity challenges in Zambia towards the latter part of 2022. This is on the back of the fact, though, that during the course of last year, we'd seen the currency strengthen towards, again, Q4 when it started weakening. We're starting off the year when the currency seems to be on weaker footing. Our outlook, given all that we expect, weak global economic environment, a strong sense of risk off environment as well that could have an impact on our various markets, tells us that the volatility on the kwacha can still be expected. What's your take on all of this?
So I think the important thing to understand is that the structural challenges within the economy and the FX market were not necessarily addressed. So post IMF, there was an appreciation within the currency, but just after that, what we did see is that some of the idiosyncratic features of our economy started to show, right? So demand started outstripping supply, and then we saw the natural pressure come on the currency. Liquidity also became a bit of a challenge towards the end of the year, just because you had that seasonal uptick in terms of agri demand, which added on to the energy demand and other demand within the economy. So we saw that imbalance sort of happen, and we've seen the challenges start to re-emerge. Not as stark as the ones we had previously, but obviously that's a challenge that we see going forward.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier the impacts of the IMF being quite positive on the market, but yet at the same time, we know that these discussions have been quite prolonged with respect to getting to agreeable terms and levels on the back of the restructuring, as one can imagine. And this has been a key theme for Zambia, and you talk about some of these structural issues coming into 2023. Now, on the back of this, what are some of the other things that you think government is going to be focusing on, right? It's got its debt issues on the one end, but you still have an economy that needs to be growing comfortably over the next few years. What are its sectoral focus really in this year?
Yeah, so the sector focus was pretty evident within the budget, right? So there was a clear focus towards agric, tourism, manufacturing. Mining will always be there as a mainstay of the economy, but there's a clear direction in terms of trying to diversify into the other sectors. So we've seen very good initiatives within sectors such as manufacturing. There have been quite a lot of incentives that have been offered for investment within that space. Also note something that was critical for us is the setup of the multi-facility economic zone in the northwest country. So we have some already operating, but the introduction of this new one is sort of a bit to target the market on the Congolese side.
Yes.
Yeah, and also to drive exports within that market. So there's quite a bit of initiatives, tourism as well. We've seen a lot of efforts that are being made to sort of market the country better. And also within the budget, we saw money that has been pumped in from supporting partners such as the World Bank, just in terms of improving infrastructure to drive growth within that sector. So there's a lot of focus to drive growth away from mining, which is a mainstay. And that is something that should help going forward.
This balance that is coming in from both government, but what you're also intimating towards is also the private sector. So you're getting a sense that there is increased investments into Zambia also coming from the private sector, which is quite positive. One thing, though, that I am concerned about is, you mentioned we saw this budget last year and assumptions have been made with respect to copper production. And we, as you know, as a house are concerned just in general about commodity prices. So what happens if we don't see this requisite revenue that will be coming out of these various mines? Is this a possibility for 2023? And, what are you seeing with respect to, possibility for production to pick up?
So the big elephant in the room, so to speak, are the two giants on the copper belt. That's Mopani and KCM. As we know, in the past few years, they've both had challenges. With KCM, it's a legal issue. With Mopani, it's more of a financing issue. So how do you turn these two assets around, right? And I think it's been very evident from the government side that they recognize that there's a challenge, and they recognize that there's a need to turn around those assets if production is going to improve, right? So we have the two big mines those are operating quite well. They did have a few challenges last year, just in the earlier part of the year, weather and some issues around COVID. But that we don't expect that to continue through this year. So we expect an uptick from those assets. There's also another asset, Lumwana, which is also on the northwestern side, that we also expect to continue pumping at the right pace.
Yeah.
But it's these two big giants that really hold the key right now. This is away from the new investments that we're also expecting for new production. So long term, we're still bullish when it comes to production, just because of the many incentives that are being given to the sector. But short to medium term, the production will be largely dependent on what happens with those two major assets on the copper belt. Yeah.
So last day in December, we saw the announcement, Zambia going into load shedding on the back of Kariba Dam levels being quite low, and that being instituted as a way to conserve energy across the country. 2023, is this still going to be a concern, do you think?
Yes, Daniel. Mostly this is because we're dependent on hydroelectric power, and this depends on the amount of rainfall that we get. So this is a big concern. And when you look at some of the alternatives that we have, the major one would be around diesel gensets, right? And we've seen the uptick in terms of pricing when it comes to the pricing of diesel. And so to what extent are businesses going to be able to stomach that increase in terms of costs? Are they able to find other alternatives? So that's something that we're going to look at as a significant factor going into this year if the rain shortage continues to affect electricity production.